What if Nazi Germany was bombed by an aircraft it couldn't see it or stop? In 1943, Berlin wasn't just the capital of the Third Reich. It was the most heavily defended airspace in the world. But even the strongest walls can't stop a ghost. By mid-1943, Nazi Germany had developed a vast and sophisticated air defense system over its cities, especially over Berlin. The British nighttime bombing raids had pushed the Luftwaffe to its limit, and the Reich responded with a layered defense doctrine. At the top were radar installations like Würzburg and Freya, sweeping the skies for approaching aircraft at distances up to 150 kilometers. Once detected, operators coordinated with flak batteries, over 400 heavy anti-aircraft guns placed in rings around Berlin, guided by radar and sound triangulation. Then came the searchlights, slicing through the night in massive arrays, trying to visually lock onto bombers. And finally, the night fighters, Messerschmitt Bf-110S and Junkers Ju-88s equipped with early airborne radar, scrambling to intercept bombers once they crossed into the city's airspace. On paper, it was airtight, a wall of metal, light, and sound that had turned countless Allied bombers into flaming wreckage. But this entire system relied on one simple assumption, that the enemy could be seen, heard, or tracked. And that's where the thought experiment begins. What happens to a fortress built for brute force when the attacker is invisible? Because if a stealth bomber had appeared in the skies over Berlin in 1943, not a single radar blip, searchlight beam, or scrambling pilot would have known it was there until the first explosion lit up the city. When people hear stealth, they think invisibility. But the real power of stealth isn't that you vanish, it's that you never appeared to begin with. To understand how a stealth bomber would have changed the air war over Berlin, we first need to understand what stealth actually is. In modern terms, stealth is not one single technology. It's a multi-layered design philosophy aimed at reducing an aircraft's signature across all detection domains. Radar? Modern stealth aircraft are shaped with sharp angles and faceted surfaces, deflecting electromagnetic waves away from the source rather than bouncing them back. Their surfaces are coated with radar-absorbent materials, RAM, designed to soak up radio signals rather than reflect them. Infrared? Jet exhaust is shielded or diffused, minimizing heat signatures that would light up thermal trackers. Acoustics? Internal weapon bays eliminate the drag and noise of hanging bombs. Special engine inlets and fan designs muffle turbine sounds, making the aircraft surprisingly quiet at cruise. Visual? Low-altitude shadow masking, matte finishes, and even daylight-specific paint schemes make them harder to spot with the naked eye, especially at high altitudes. Now imagine all of that in 1943. At that time, German radar systems operated in the VHF and UHF bands, with resolutions far too coarse to detect something like a B-2 Spirit or even an F-117. Their systems assumed large metallic objects with predictable returns, not radar-slick silhouettes with the cross-section of a bird. Even the acoustic detector's giant dish microphones once used in early warning would have struggled. Modern stealth aircraft cruise higher and quieter than any World War II bomber ever could. And the most shocking part? Nothing in the German arsenal, not radar, not optics, not human eyes, would have known where to point. It's not just that a stealth bomber could strike Berlin undetected, it's that the very concept of stealth didn't exist yet. And when you don't even have a word for what just hit you, how do you fight back? Next, we'll meet the hypothetical machine behind this thought experiment and what it would actually be capable of. To the engineers of 1943, it would look like a spaceship. To the radar operators, like nothing at all. Let's imagine the unthinkable. In an alternate timeline, a stealth bomber from the late 20th century, say, something between the F-117 Nighthawk and the B-2 Spirit, is sent back to 1943 with a single mission: strike Berlin. So what is this machine? Start with the shape: a flying wing, no tail, no vertical surfaces, no drag-inducing fuselage. This alone would have broken the minds of aeronautical engineers of the era. Its radar cross-section, comparable to that of a small bird. Its skin, covered in materials that absorb radar energy, unheard of at the time. Then there's altitude. Where Allied bombers like the Lancaster struggled to reach 20,000 feet, a stealth bomber would cruise at 50,000 feet, high above flak, out of range of most interceptors. Speed? Not supersonic, but irrelevant because it's never targeted. Navigation? Guided by inertial systems, GPS, and terrain mapping radar that lets it fly with precision, even through cloud cover or at night. Something no World War II aircraft could even dream of. Armament? Let's say it carries 2 precision-guided JDAMs or even something more basic, but accurate. A single strike on a command bunker, munitions depot, or infrastructure hub could paralyze operations. And here's what most people forget. This aircraft wouldn't need to fight its way in or out. It would simply appear, strike, and disappear. To German air defense crews, it would be as if Berlin had been hit by an invisible hand. No scramble order, no intercept. Just the distant thunder of an explosion, with no cause. And that's where the psychological damage would begin. Because in war, what you can't see is often more terrifying than what you can. It's not just the explosion that breaks a regime. It's the silence before it and the confusion after. Imagine the scene. Early morning in Berlin. No sirens, no detected formations, no radio chatter from flak towers. Then, out of nowhere, a massive detonation near the Reich Chancellery. And the most chilling detail? There's no aircraft in the sky. Within minutes, the Nazi command spirals into crisis. Military operators scramble for explanations. Was it sabotage? A misfire? A British weapon of a new kind? Radar logs show nothing. Searchlight crews saw nothing. Night fighters were never scrambled because no one gave the order. Hitler's high command, already paranoid and fractured, now faces something far more dangerous than bombs: uncertainty. The entire Luftwaffe chain of command would be questioned. Göring, already under pressure after failing to stop Allied raids, would likely be blamed for losing control of Berlin's skies. But this isn't just about leadership in fighting. This is about belief. The myth of German technological superiority? Shattered. The invincibility of Berlin's defenses? Exposed. And the most dangerous idea of all? That the enemy now holds a weapon the Reich cannot detect, target, or stop. In a regime driven by control and fear, that's a psychological time bomb, and one stealth strike might have done what thousands of daylight raids never could: made them doubt everything. But could Germany retaliate? Could the Luftwaffe adapt, or even detect this kind of threat? That's the question we'll answer next. Every empire believes it can adapt until it meets something from a future it never planned for. After the shock of an undetectable strike, Nazi Germany would have faced a terrifying question. Could the Luftwaffe do anything about it? The short answer? Number. But let's break down why and how deep the gap really was. First, radar. German systems like Freya and Würzburg could detect bomber formations, but only if the aircraft had a large radar signature. A stealth bomber, with its faceted angles and radar-absorbent skin, would have had a cross-section thousands of times smaller than the aircraft those systems were calibrated to find. Second, interception. Even if the radar could somehow see the aircraft, Messerschmitt Bf-110 or night-fighting Ju-88s would have no chance of catching it. The stealth bomber would be flying twice as high, using navigation systems so precise it wouldn't need to fly predictable routes or bomber streams. Third, tactics. Luftwaffe doctrine was built around mass interception, spotting bomber formations, throwing up waves of fighters, flooding the sky with flak. But this threat would be singular, surgical, and unlocatable. And the biggest disadvantage? There was no concept of stealth. No design philosophy, no research track, no countermeasure. You cannot defend against something you don't believe is possible. Even if the Germans had captured a wreckage, reverse engineering stealth tech would have taken decades. It wasn't just about materials, it was about thinking differently, about low observability as an offensive weapon, not just a passive defense. So how would the Luftwaffe respond? They couldn't. All they could do was brace for the next strike and hope they'd see it coming. But what if that next strike didn't hit a military target, but a system that held the Reich together? Let's go there next. Not all bombs need to flatten cities. Some just need to hit the right nerve. If a stealth bomber struck Berlin in 1943, it wouldn't waste its payload on symbolic landmarks or civilian districts. It would aim for the infrastructure that held the Nazi war machine together. So, what would that mean? Target 1. Communications command centers. Hidden deep in bunkers or camouflaged buildings were the Reich's central coordination hubs. Destroying one could sever battlefield communication with the Eastern Front for days. It's not just the damage, it's the confusion. Orders delayed, responses broken, units left guessing. Target 2. Ministry of Armaments and War Production. Run by Albert Speer, this bureaucratic engine oversaw the flow of tanks, planes, and ammunition. A precision-guided strike here wouldn't just damage a building. It would paralyze procurement lines across Germany. Target 3. Railway interchange at Lehrter Bahnhof. The backbone of Nazi logistics wasn't highways, it was trains. One strike on Berlin's key rail junction could create a logistical cascade failure, delaying reinforcements, starving the front lines of fuel and munitions. Target 4. Propaganda infrastructure. The Ministry of Public Enlightenment and Propaganda, led by Joseph Goebbels, controlled the narrative. What happens if a strike kills key broadcasters or disables radio transmission? The regime loses its voice and silence breeds panic. But perhaps the most damaging target of all? Perception itself. A perfectly executed stealth strike wouldn't just destroy physical assets, it would plant doubt. Doubt in the chain of command, doubt in Berlin's security, doubt in the war's outcome. And if a single aircraft could do that, what if the next one carried something far more powerful? That brings us to the most terrifying variable of all. 2 years before Hiroshima, Berlin disappears in a flash. What happens to history then? Let's imagine the hypothetical to its logical and most devastating conclusion. What if that stealth bomber flying over Berlin in 1943 wasn't carrying conventional payloads, but a nuclear bomb? At that moment in real history, the Manhattan Project was still in its accelerated development phase. The first successful test, Trinity, wouldn't occur until July 1945. But in this alternate timeline, the technology exists early, and it flies. And unlike Hiroshima or Nagasaki, which were heavily defended but not critical command centers, Berlin was the political, military, and ideological heart of Nazi Germany. A single nuclear detonation over central Berlin, even a relatively small fission bomb, would have vaporized the Reichstag, Chancellery, and surrounding government district, killed tens of thousands instantly, including key figures in the Nazi command, blanketed the city with radiation, rendering the capital uninhabitable. But the physical destruction wouldn't be the end. It would only be the beginning. Psychologically, the Nazi regime, already strained by defeats at Stalingrad and in North Africa, would face an existential collapse. Militarily, the loss of central command, combined with total communications breakdown, could fracture Germany's ability to coordinate defenses across Europe. And geopolitically, the war could end in 1943. Soviet forces, seeing the collapse, would surge west. The Western Allies might occupy Berlin 2 years early and face off with the Red Army in the ruins of a city destroyed not by artillery, but by something no one else had. And one terrifying reality would emerge. The United States, and not the Soviet Union, used the first nuclear weapon in Europe. What would that have meant for the post-war world? For NATO? For the Cold War? For the moral weight of the bomb? Maybe that's a different video. But in this one, we've seen how the presence of a single, invisible aircraft could shift the balance of the entire century. Now let's land this story. It never happened. No stealth bomber flew over Berlin. No silent explosion rewrote the war. But what if it had? This thought experiment isn't just about military fiction. It's a lens into how technology reshapes power, how timing is everything, and how history is often written not just by victors, but by inventors. The F-117 wouldn't fly until the 1982nd. The B-2 Spirit wouldn't take to the skies until the 1992nd. But their existence today reminds us of one chilling truth. If a single machine had arrived just 24 months earlier, World War II might have ended not in Berlin, but because of it. No scramble, no defense, no second chance. Just the sound of nothing, followed by the shock of everything. And maybe that's the real legacy of stealth. Not just hiding from radars, but from history itself. A shadow that never cast itself on the past, but could have changed it forever. Thank you guys for watching till this moment. See you in the next one.